Tonight, deadly attacks in Afghanistan by rebels determined to disrupt the presidential election. Lara Logan is with U.S. Marines on a mission to make the voting safe.
The Marines have just found an IED in their way, so everybody's pulling back so they don't get blown up.
I'm Maggie Rodriguez. Also tonight, the government cracks down on abusive debt collectors.
You get off the phone with me, that's it. The sheriffs will be there. DSS will come for your kids.
And it wasn't supposed to be this way. In a state that has universal health insurance, many still get their care in emergency rooms.
This is the CBS Evening News with Katie Couric.
Good evening. Katie's off tonight. Election day in Afghanistan is now less than 24 hours away, a critical test for the fledgling democracy as the Taliban does everything it can to sabotage the vote. There was unprecedented security today as ballots were delivered to polling places in Kandahar province. In Kabul, insurgents fired rockets at the presidential palace. No one was injured there, but 8 people were killed and 55 wounded when a suicide car bomber attacked a NATO convoy. And in eastern Afghanistan, 2 American service members were killed by a roadside bomb. In the south, meanwhile, U.S. Marines are going town to town in Helmand province to flush out the Taliban. Chief Foreign Affairs correspondent Lara Logan is on the front lines near Gomsur.
Hey, Gomez, moving to contact. Quick it up.
With the presidential election tomorrow, the Marine mission in Helmand province has taken on even greater significance. Here, Echo Company is heading out to a known Taliban village just a mile from their small combat outpost deep in southern Helmand. This time, they've chosen an unusual way in.
By coming through the canal, the Marines are hoping to have the element of surprise.
In the month and a half since Echo Company fought their way in here, they've never been to this village without getting into a fight. And they've never been all the way in water that's often up to their necks.
They just saw us?
It's real hard to do anything that's covert because we don't know who's the spotters and who's not.
The Marines keep going even though they now realize they could be heading straight into an ambush.
240 in assault.
They're trying to secure the area so people can vote, but the nearest polling station is 12 miles to the north, and along the way is hardcore Taliban territory. So few people here are expected to make the journey.
What are we waiting for now? IEDs.
IEDs, or improvised explosive devices, are a Taliban weapon of choice here, so Marine engineers go ahead to clear the route and quickly return, hurrying to get away from an IED they've just found in the exact place the Marines often use to enter the village.
The Marines have just found an IED in their way, so everybody's pulling back so they don't get blown up.
After 4 hours in the water waiting to destroy the IED, the Marines get word the enemy has moved out. So they start to head back, taking cover as the IED is finally blown up. It's rare for these Marines not to get into a gun battle. They say it will happen tomorrow, like it has almost every day since they arrived. Lara Logan, CBS News, Southern Helmand.
No matter who wins the presidential election there, the U.S. expects changes from the Afghan government. First and foremost, more help fighting the insurgents. But as David Martin reports, the election has given the Taliban new incentive to throw that country into chaos.
With the election looming, the Taliban has increased its number of attacks from 32 a day to 48. When that suicide bomber in Kabul crashed his car into a NATO convoy, the Taliban was quick to claim credit for the mayhem. But a senior NATO officer insists 48 attacks cannot shut down 6,500 polling places.
They do not have the capacity to intimidate and prevent 15 million Afghans voters that have registered for these elections.
But Mandy Clark, who is covering the election for CBS News in Kabul, says the Taliban can hold down voter turnout.
What you have to remember about Afghanistan is that it is a vast country with the majority of the population living in remote rural areas. So even if the Taliban just block off one road, it can stop an entire village from reaching the polling station, and that could have a significant impact on Election Day.
Clark says reduced turnout would probably hurt incumbent President Hamid Karzai the most. in what has turned out to be a spirited campaign complete with debates. Karzai is still expected to get the most votes, although he may need a runoff to defeat Abdullah Abdullah, a doctor who once served as the country's foreign minister.
The United States, I think, accepts the fact that President Karzai is likely to win, but it would like to see a very different President Karzai over the next 4 years than they've had for the last few years.
According to John Nagel of the Center for New American Security, the fact this has turned into a real horse race could serve as a wake-up call to Karzai.
This is a good forcing function to put more coercive pressure on President Karzai, on his government, to root out some corruption and be more responsive to his people.
That's what the U.S. wants out of this election, a better Afghan government. David Martin, CBS News, the Pentagon.
Here at home, at a time when so many Americans are struggling to pay their bills, a government crackdown today on debt collectors. The average household in this country owes more than $10,000 on credit cards alone, and about 2 million people seek help from credit counselors every year. People in debt can be easy targets for unscrupulous collection agents, as Chief Investigative Correspondent Armin Katayan tells us.
Get an education. Since you're sitting on your fat derriere all day long.
Michelle Minton was stunned when she took a call like this about a $4,400 bill she says didn't exist, part of a 45-minute harangue by a debt collector who issued this threat.
If you get off the phone with me, that's it. The sheriffs will be there and your kids. DSS will come for your kids.
The company behind the call, Kingman Cole & Associates, lists a P.O. box in this UPS store as its address, one of 13 debt collection companies run by a single Buffalo-based operation.
This is actually a sad story.
Today, New York Attorney General Andrew Cuomo sued the group, vowing to shut it down.
And they're going to scare people into paying.
CBS News has learned that the Federal Trade Commission has received more than 45,000 complaints against debt collectors in the first 6 months of the year, up nearly 20% over the same period last year. Attorney Amir Goldstein, who has sued several collection agencies over their tactics, sees a fly-by-night pattern.
It closes shop, disappears, nobody answers the phones anymore, then they reopen down the block under another corporate name.
I'm trying to find...
We saw that firsthand here in Buffalo, chasing one debt collector from here
They are no longer here.
to here to here.
I have no idea what's going on. I just started working here, so...
A company said to be out of business that was actually up and running.
I think it's the rare exception.
Adam Peterman represents the debt collection industry.
Lying on the phone, attacking people, berating people. Is that what your industry is about right now?
No, every consumer has to be treated with dignity and respect.
I can't afford lawyers. I have 2 small kids. My husband's the only one working.
Which was why Michelle Minton was bullied into doing the unthinkable, paying $900 to settle a debt she didn't know. Armin Katayan, CBS News, Washington.
Now to health and a question facing many American parents and their daughters, whether to get the HPV vaccine to prevent cervical cancer. More than 26 million doses have been distributed since it was approved for females ages 9 to 26 back in 2006. Tonight, we have the results of the first major study on its side effects since that approval, plus a review of the drug maker's marketing tactics. Here's Dr. John LaPook.
When Barbara Archiello's doctor recommended a vaccine to prevent cancer of the cervix, she jumped at the chance.
I just think it's a great thing for women to have.
But the most comprehensive look at side effects since the HPV vaccine was approved in 2006 raises questions about its safety. In today's Journal of the American Medical Association, the CDC reported over 12,000 side effects after 23 million doses were distributed. 94% of the problems were not serious, but 6% were, including patients who were hospitalized, permanently disabled, or died. There were 32 deaths, 1 in over 700,000 doses.
It really isn't increased above what we've seen with other vaccines in that age group and what is seen generally in people of that age group.
But problems that did occur more frequently than expected were fainting, about once every 12,000 doses, and blood clots, once every 500,000 doses.
The reporting on blood clots was concerning to CDC, concerning in the way that we think it needs further investigation.
One last. Gardasil.
Critics question the vaccine maker's aggressive ad campaign because it paid medical societies to help spread the word and underplayed the importance of evaluating the vaccine's risks and benefits.
It screeched its message. All women are at equal risks. Protect yourself from cervical cancer, and this is the way to do it. And the fact that the medical societies repeated this message is what the issue is that concerns us.
Merck says after reviewing the new report of adverse events, it continues to be confident in the safety of the vaccine. While the CDC and FDA continue to recommend its use, doctors say they'll look at the HPV vaccine for girls and women on a case-by-case basis.
If you're going to administer the vaccine, you should discuss these risks with your patient.
Something else to consider for parents uncertain about whether to have their daughters vaccinated. Routine pap smears can also help prevent cervical cancer. Maggie.
A great reminder. Dr. John LaPook, thanks, John. If you want more on this study, go to our partner in health news, webmd.com, and search HPV vaccine. At the White House today, foreign affairs took center stage. President Obama said Middle East peace efforts are moving in the right direction. He thanked Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak for trying to get the Israelis and the Palestinians back to the negotiating table. This was Mubarak's first visit in more than 5 years. He'd stayed away to protest the U.S. invasion of Iraq. Another visitor to the White House today was former President Bill Clinton. He briefed President Obama and Vice President Biden on his mission to North Korea, where he met with Kim Jong-il and secured the release of 2 American journalists. Coming up next on the CBS Evening News, one of the most basic medical problems Americans face. Where are we going to find enough family doctors? Now, health care reform. One proposal in Congress would make it mandatory for most Americans to buy insurance, with fines for those who do not. That's the way it works in Massachusetts, and 97% of residents there are covered. But while they have insurance, what some don't have is a doctor. Here's CNN medical correspondent and CBS News contributor Dr. Sanjay Gupta.
Fernando Gutierrez.
You're looking at the second busiest emergency room in the state. They treat over 100,000 patients a year. But here's the thing.
Apathetic thyrotoxicosis.
According to Dr. Niels Ratlev, who runs the ER, a quarter of them don't need his services.
The way I would phrase it is to say I think there are alternative sites of care that would be more appropriate.
He means a primary care doctor's office.
The majority of patients who are frequent utilizers of the emergency department actually have insurance. They have a primary care physician, but they choose to come to the ED because they don't have access.
Like Kenneth Mills, who's in pain from a bowling injury.
I wanted to call my doctor this morning, but I wouldn't be able to get in and see him.
Mills is bruised, not broken, and could have easily been treated outside the emergency room.
Are you sort of surprised that you had to come to the emergency room to take care of something like this? It doesn't
Well,
sound...
I wish I had a primary I could just call and come right in. I wouldn't have to wait as long.
That's the issue. Just having insurance doesn't guarantee access. There aren't enough doctors.
It is a real problem. According to the Department of Health and Human Services, we are more than 16,000 primary care doctors short in the United States.
About 26,000 new doctors enter the workforce every year, but only 6,500 enter primary care. One reason is that starting salaries for primary care doctors are a lot lower than for specialists, like in radiology, cardiology, and urology.
I've been in practice for 10 years now, and I still owe $60,000 in my medical school loans.
But it's not just the pay.
These are all the different forms, and Mass Health ones.
It's the paperwork.
Blue Cross.
Dr. Kate Atkinson is drowning in it and says that's what's keeping doctors away from primary practices.
This is the reason why.
Too much paperwork.
Too much paperwork. Feet are particularly bad.
The reality here is that Dr. Atkinson and her nurse practitioner treat 3,000 patients.
Aetna, Cigna forms. Oh, there's at least over 100 forms.
But filling out hundreds of different forms takes a staff of 11. She simply can't make ends meet.
Do you know that I lost a staff person last year to Starbucks because they could pay her more money than I could pay her?
To Starbucks, Maggie, and therein lies the point to some extent. If you have health care insurance, it doesn't mean a lot necessarily if primary care doctors like Kate Atkinson can't afford to stay in business. Maggie?
Exactly right, Sanjay. And it's clear that no matter whose health care plan passes, we're going to need more general practitioners. How do you do that? How do you increase the number of family physicians?
Well, you know, I think money is part of this to some extent. Clearly, you saw that primary care doctors make a lower income on average than specialists. There have been some discussions of medical school loan forgiveness programs, which might help, but everywhere we looked, it really came back down to this issue of paperwork. Kate Atkinson has 3,000 patients. Each of those patients generates paperwork. A lot of that comes from the insurance companies. It's just hard for her to get her work done.
All right, Dr. Sanjay Gupta, thank you.
Thank you.
In other news tonight, a sad note, political columnist Bob Novak died today at his home in Washington after a year-long battle with brain cancer.
From the right, I'm Robert Novak.
As the sharp-edged conservative voice on CNN's Crossfire, Robert Novak pioneered the high-volume...
Just shut up, will you? Shut up.
High-tension...
I hate that.
...talking head battles that are now a staple of cable news.
What do you think about federal funding of abortions?
But he was more than just the face of high-pitched Washington political theater. The column he wrote for 45 years, 30 of them with Roland Evans, was one of the longest running in U.S. history, offering political analysis and opinion. He also often scooped competitors, and in 2006, he famously blew the cover of CIA operative Valerie Plame, sparking a government investigation that led to the perjury conviction of Scooter Libby, Vice President Cheney's former chief of staff. In his memoir, Novak wrote, "I had a terrific time fulfilling all my youthful dreams and at the same time making life miserable for hypocritical, posturing politicians and, I hope, performing a service for my country." Robert Novak was 78.
The Cash for Clunkers program has given the auto industry a much-needed boost. GM said today it will increase production by 60,000 vehicles and call back nearly 1,400 laid-off workers. Industry-wide, 411,000 vehicles have been traded in under the program. More now from Dean Reynolds.
At McElhaney Auto Plaza in Clinton, Iowa, the clunkers are adding up, along with new car customers.
We've seen increase in traffic and sales, probably 100%.
With the Cash for Clunkers dealer discount of $4,500, Max Covell traded in his 19-year-old Chevy pickup for a new Toyota Corolla.
It was too good of a deal to pass up.
I'm glad you guys took advantage of the Cash for Clunkers.
And according to the government, the Corolla is the #1 seller, followed by the Honda Civic, the Ford Focus, the Toyota Camry, and Toyota Prius. On average, customers are trading mostly trucks that get 15.8 miles per gallon for cars getting 25. And of the top 10 sellers, 54% were manufactured in the United States, meaning Cash for Clunkers is boosting the economy.
It's one of the main reasons we actually will see positive growth in the second half of 2009.
But it's not all roses. Dealers are increasingly annoyed that the government has been slow to reimburse them for the $3,500 to $4,500 markdowns they've given buyers.
Every dealer's winding up making a decision, how far do you go into this thing before you have to just cut it off.
So the Obama administration announced this week it's tripling the number of workers processing the backlog of transactions. Still, one survey is detecting a slowdown in deals, and it may have to do with a lack of cars to sell.
Of course, demand's going to go down when people don't think they're going to be able to get the vehicles that they want out of the dealers.
To keep cars and customers in the showroom, Ford, GM, Toyota, and Honda are all increasing production now for the first time in years. Dean Reynolds, CBS News, Chicago.
Coming up next, saving lives with one simple formula, H2O. We end tonight with something tasteless, odorless, and colorless, something most of us take for granted. But 1 in 6 people around the world cannot because they don't have access to it, fresh drinking water. For them, Seth Doan tells us, it's one more thing, priceless.
You might not blink at this, but what about this or these? They're just one way that 33-year-old Scott Harrison is trying to get you to start paying attention to water.
When you show this to people, what's the reaction? Disbelief.
Disbelief that this is drinking water for much of the world. So that's why his charity water raises money to drill wells in developing countries.
There are just better things to do with money than what most people do with them.
His intentions were not always so pure. Until age 28, he was a nightclub promoter in New York City.
I was selling escapism. I was selling selfishness and sort of decadence.
Then, an epiphany.
I just realized man, you know, I've arrived and I'm miserable. You know, I'm soulless.
So he quit the nightlife and volunteered with a charity. In Africa, he saw how simple medicine could save lives and how dirty water could destroy them.
And we'd see people drinking out of swamps. I mean, green, muddy, you know, algae-covered swamps. And we'd say to each other, well, no wonder everyone's sick.
That's when he decided to use his talent for promotion as a force for good.
We think charity should be cool.
Using graphics that catch your eye. Or an ad that imagines New Yorkers collecting drinking water from Central Park. In just 3 years, Scott's charity has raised more than $10 million worldwide. A well costs about $5,000, and donors can track exactly where their money went.
Yeah, this is a look at our sort of footprint so far in
These are all wells.
These are all water projects, yeah.
With almost 1,400 projects and counting.
What does clean water mean to these communities?
Water changes everything. It means health, it means opportunity, it means better education.
It means instead of this, there will be more pictures like these. Seth Doane, CBS News, New York.
And that's the CBS Evening News. For Katie Couric, I'm Maggie Rodriguez. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the morning on The Early Show. Good night.